and welcome back to RPMbassy yet again. Today we're going over an album that I'm surprised we haven't featured the artist before. This feels like a no-brainer really, but as far as I'm aware, neither me nor John have spoken about this artist whatsoever, and it's a group that everybody knows. Agneta, Benny, Bjorn and Annie Fried. It's Abba with the album Arrival. So this is a 1976 album, came out in October of that year, and I mean, what an album. It's difficult to kind of differentiate between their entire career when you have so many amazing songs and singles and a wealth of hits over the years. But for me, this is probably my favourite of their albums. And while the songs that we all know and love on here are fantastic ones, there's one track which, although technically was a single, what I feel is a very overlooked track. But we'll go through it briefly in terms of how it came together, and then we'll talk about the tracks. So this sort of came off the back of the song Fernando, which was actually initially a solo song technically for Annie Fried, or Frida as most people tend to refer to her. So Fernando was a song for her second solo album, and then they re-recorded it and released it as a single at the start of 1976, and then this sort of was off the back of that. And later versions of this album actually have Fernando on, but this one, the sort of original pressing, does not. And that's fine. Fernando's a great song, but it always kind of feels a bit weird when you've kind of always like co-opted a song that's like from another project, but what have you. But we know all the big tracks off of this one, of course. You've got Dancing Queen, Knowing Me, Knowing You, Money, 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 like among others, like three of their biggest songs. But I mean, how many of their songs aren't big at this point? You know, they're one of the biggest pop bands of all time. But yeah, we'll go through the bits and pieces. Side A, track 1, When I Kissed the Teacher. What a phenomenal way to open an album. Really, really great guitar. And I tell you what, some of the best bass playing like in history. The fantastic bass sound, the arrangement, the way that it sits in the mix, absolutely phenomenal. And Rutger Gunnarsson is the bassist for the entirety of the album, and he does an excellent job. It's that perfect balance of sort of hard attack, but still like there's a bit of finesse to it. It's not just like an aggressive bass line or anything. It's so well played, so tasteful, and I think When I Kissed the Teacher is kind of like the exemplary track for that. It really does shine through fantastically, and that again, you know, it's not a big track when people think of this album, but that is a great way to open an album. Obviously, Dancing Queen, we know that song. I'm not going to go into that piano bit at the beginning. I feel like that's kind of, you know, at this point, it's probably been as played in as many pantomimes and plays as it has on CD players and record players. But at this point, My Love, My Life, another fantastic song. A little bit down tempo. I really like the acoustic sound in this one. It's really rich sounding, but also a little bit artificial, but not in a bad way. That's a weird way of describing it, but yeah, a little bit artificial. But I really like how it sounds. It kind of sounds almost like a PCM sample in a way. Dum Diddle Diddle. So I was quite surprised to look back and realise that this was a single. It's not a song that I've ever particularly like found that amazing. It's fine, but I think the title and the kind of chorus of it is always a little bit weird. It kind of feels a bit cheesy, and yeah, I get it. It's like a disco pop album. There's a level of cheesiness that we always kind of appreciate. But that and one other song on this album, it kind of, I'd say they are the weakest points of the album. Next up, you've got Knowing Me, Knowing You. Again, we know all about that. And then on side B, we start off with Money, Money, Money. Again, I'm not going to go into detail about these tracks because everybody's heard them so many times. They're great tracks. End of. for me, side B track 2, That's Me. This is the standout song from the album as far as I'm concerned, and this was actually released as a single, but only in Japan, from what I can gather, which weirdly had Money 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 as the B-side, like a weird sort of switch around. I don't quite know why that was done, but That's Me is excellent, and if you haven't listened to an ABBA album, like a studio album all the way through, and you're just familiar with the greatest hits, definitely check out That's Me. That's a really, really excellent track. After that, my least favourite track by far, Why Did It Have to Be Me? So this, neither Annie or Agneta are the focal point of this track, and kind of shows. It's a rock and roll sort of track, a little bit bluesy. It's not a bad song, but it doesn't fit with the rest of the album. Like, it doesn't make sense with the flow of the album. You know, John spoke about it a couple of weeks ago, the sort of the flow of the albums and sitting down and making sure that the track listing makes sense. Not only does this song not fit within the album, but the placement of it doesn't really make sense. Like, it feels too late, too near the close of the album for me for it to make sense. If it had been on, like, you know, say track 3, I think that would have been fine. You know, you kind of, with the ebb and flow of the album, this kind of is a weird sort of way to have the energy shift this late in the game, so to speak. Penultimate track, Tiger, really, really cool track, and the chorus, when the girls are singing the word "I am the tiger," the vibrato on their vocals is unreal. That's probably the bit on this album that I would pinpoint as, like, this is why they were so good, why they were so popular. Like, the genuine level of talent that they had. That song, I think, really, really shines because of that. And the final track on this version of the album, the title track, Arrival. Interestingly, the album had been named before the song had been named, so they then chose to name it after the album, rather than most bands, you know, when you have a track which shares the title with the album, it tends to be the album is named after the song. But yeah, this one, it's not an instrumental, but it may as well be. So there's no lyrics per se. There are vocals, but there's no lyrics. So it's weird. It almost feels like kind of Celtic in a way. You've got lots of kind of synthesizers that sound very close to something like a bagpipe, or, you know, similar sort of sound. It's almost like a chant or like a Gregorian choir kind of a vibe. A really interesting song, really like triumphant but melancholic. Really sounds fantastic, and it's an interesting way to end an otherwise like very upbeat and poppy album. It's not like a super sad song, but it's definitely different to how the rest of the album feels, but not different in the way that Why Did It Have to Be Me is different. So yeah, really nice way to end the album. As I've said, everybody knows this album, or certainly knows the big songs off of this. But for reference, in terms of how well it did, this at the end of the 70s was the 7th most bought album in the UK across the entire decade. And as far as the actual chart positions when this was released, I believe it's Australia, Belgium, Denmark, the Netherlands, Germany, the UK, Norway, Sweden, and possibly some other places, New Zealand. It was number 1 in all of those countries, number 2 in Finland. I think it got to like number 6 or 7 in France. So yeah, it did bloody well in a lot of places. And I do wonder whether or not, if Fernando had been on the original pressing and, you know, released as part of the album, whether or not it would have sold even more. Because, as I say, later on down the line, it was re-released in different versions with Fernando on there. And there are also versions of the album which have the song Happy Hawaii, I think it's called, which at one point was potentially going to be on the album in place of Why Did It Have to Be Me. I can't say I'm like that fussed either way. Happy Hawaii is fine. I don't know if I like it more or less than Why Did It Have to Be Me. I'd say probably less. It's a little bit, it feels like kind of unfinished in a way. It's not got the kind of pop and pizzazz that the rest of the album does. It sounds a little bit like a sort of the stereotypical like Hawaii vibes. You've got kind of the pedal steel and all that nonsense, and it's a good song, but I wouldn't say it's much more than that. So I think the track listing that they have, Why Did It Have to Be Me aside, I think is really good. If I could really pick and choose, maybe I'd swap out Why Did It Have to Be Me with Fernando, but it is what it is. So yeah, great album, performed really well. Interestingly, with regards to France and it getting to sort of like a slightly lower place in the charts, they had a different cover to everyone else. So this is the cover that I think most people know and recognise, them in the sort of cockpit of the helicopter, and then the back cover you've got the helicopter in flight. But France, I believe they had the sort of inner sleeve and the cover swapped. So the inner sleeve is this photo, and this was the front cover in France. And you know what? I'm kind of jealous, actually. Maybe I should try and get hold of a French copy, because that to me is a bit cooler. That's a little bit downplayed in a way, and I think the sort of the large amount of black at the top of the photo, that just like kind of fairly basic sort of graphic design, just slap a black gradient on it, kind of takes away from it a little bit. I'm not sure, but for me, I think just like the colours on this one, it's kind of a little bit more moody and cool, a little bit more nighttime, and kind of fits with Tiger, actually, the sort of vibe, because that, if you get into the lyrics of Tiger, that's quite a dark sounding song, very weird and sort of stalkerish, creepy kind of vibe to that. But yeah, I think I'll have to get hold of a French copy of this, just so I can enjoy that cool cover on the front. But yeah, if you haven't heard this album, first of all, like how, I think most people have. If you haven't got a copy of this album, just find one. Like, there are so many copies of this around, it's not going to be difficult for you to pick one up. And I mean, the original pressing sounds grand. With any luck, that French pressing will sound even better. Who knows? I think, certainly as far as vinyl goes, you should be pretty much good with any pressing or repressing. I have heard that a couple of the CD versions of this album, one of them is truly atrocious, and I believe it's the US version apparently is amazing. So if you're after a CD copy of it, try and seek out that US version. Of like it's issued in the 90s, I believe. But yeah, if you don't have a copy, just get one. They're probably giving them away. I mean, just as a reference, I have 2 copies of this. I don't even know why I have 2 copies of this. I can only assume that one of them was like a hand-me-down or like inheritance, so to speak. But yeah, there's probably a copy down the back of your sofa, so just have a look and you'll probably find it. But yeah, if you haven't got it, get it. It's great. Listen to it, love it. Yeah,